Both homelessness and world hunger are on the rise. According to endhomelessness.org, 650,000 people experienced homelessness on a single night in January 2023, which was more than a 12.1% increase over 2024. And the reasons for this don't make sense. Why are things getting worse? And why does it seem more and more people are struggling? Well, in this post, I'm going to expose the root of this problem and what we can do to stop it. First, there are enough resources for everyone on the planet, and the fact that there are many people without food and shelter is a huge problem. Now, this is a hugely complex problem when it comes to population size and the amount of finite resources available to support a population, but according to Google, Earth can sustainably support between 9 and 10 billion people. Now, one can spend their entire life looking into the question of population and resource availability, but I'm going to focus on the current problem, which is not the lack of resources to support the current population. The problem is greed. But there's an even bigger problem. Untouchable greed. But wait, there's an even bigger problem, which I'll get into after explaining what untouchable greed is. We all know greed doesn't work well in a community. Back in our caveman days, if one of the tribe members was hoarding food, he'd be banished or killed. Well, no, he'd definitely be killed. Instinctively, we know this to be true. Hence our aversion to greedy people, and even being seen as someone who's greedy. Though most of us do have a degree of greed inside of us, I believe for most, it stems from the fear of famine, which ultimately comes from the fear of death. So we know greed doesn't work, but then how is it working? Who's the member of the community that is hoarding all the resources? This is what untouchable greed is, and this is the definition for this video. Greed that can exist due to a large and fragmented community where those hoarding resources are harder to see and access. And this is the bigger problem I alluded to earlier, gigantism. Specifically, gigantism with respect to structures and institutions that are responsible for the well-being of a community. Let's look at a specific example. In the US, the political left, the Democratic Party, view gigantic corporations as a problem to society, whereas the political right, the Republican Party, view gigantic government as a problem. The idea of gigantism being an issue is similar to both corporations and government, and that is when organizations become too large, they become inefficient and develop extreme hierarchies where the people at the top are virtually untouchable from the people at the bottom. These extreme hierarchies, where the people at the top have disproportionate amounts of power with little consequence to their actions, can attract people with ill intentions. Also, the people at the top are less likely to experience any remorse when making decisions that hurt those beneath them due to the lack of personal proximity. This is the problem of gigantism. There is no accountability. When you can't see who's hurting the community or who's hurting in the community starts to break down. And this is what I believe is happening today. My conjecture is there exists a threshold to the size of a community where, if crossed, the community starts to deteriorate. This is something I want to dedicate my time to understanding and answering questions like, what is the optimal size of a community? As for the modern West, and probably the whole world, I believe we passed this threshold. Everything seems fragmented and disjointed, from language to culture and to values. With this lack of community cohesion, it becomes easier for people to feel lost, alone, and confused. I believe this also leads to depression, and at worst, it leads people to develop narcissistic and psychopathic personalities. So how does this come together with untouchable greed and greed? Greed is allowed to exist because we have passed the threshold of a healthy community size. Going back to the population issue, if there are 7 billion people on the planet, then there's enough resources for everyone to have food and shelter. In 2022, there were 15 million vacant homes, and a good portion of single-family homes are being bought up by banks. For what? That's right, money. Not to live in, not to build up and make better for the community at large, but for the purposes of extracting money. We've also heard of billionaires like Bill Gates buying a bunch of farmland for what again? Profit. The truth is, there are people and organizations, banks, hoarding the resources, and they're able to get away with this because they are untouchable. Nobody would even know where to start when attempting to hold them accountable. Well, I have one idea. That is to start building our own communities, where each member grows with the community as a whole, in wealth, health, and wisdom. This is what I will be dedicating this channel to. I sincerely believe this is the solution to every problem we face in modern times. Micro communities brings us back to our roots, where there is accountability and true connection. There is much more I can say about the benefits of smaller communities, but I'll save that for a later post. Now in this channel, I'll also be talking about things that are going on on the news and stuff, things that are happening. I'll give my own takes and thoughts on stuff. And also I'll be providing as much resources as I can, specifically for business. I just kind of want to build an audience and community that is for the idea of making a strong community that could help people, that could grow together, like I said a moment ago. Also, we can lead the way to creating a central repository of good and trustworthy information with people who run good and trustworthy businesses so that we could all help each other out. I hope everybody's doing well. I hope you take care. Bye.